Hello. Yeah. It's August 7th, 2019. This particular piece was written on June 16th, 2019. But I want to do it today because it's uppermost in the news, on the media, the themes of this piece, which have to do with white supremacy and, uh, and immigration. Founded in white supremacy. My father was an outsider. He wasn't born here. He came to America when he was 17. He spoke with an accent, a Franco Italian concoction, really a voice all his own. Born in Paris, in an Italian ghetto, a street urchin of the Pig Eye, nightclub row. I took him to see a movie about Edith Piaf a few years before he died. For him, it was a home movie. He vividly recalled his life as a very little boy, begging in the noisy, dirty, beautiful Parisian streets. My own memories of early childhood are few, a blank page gift bequeathed by my early security and privilege, provided by my mother, my father, the New Deal, the Fair Deal, FDR, and Harry S. Truman, institutionalized by Dwight David Eisenhower in the 1950s, and especially on D-Day in the 1940s. Fear is the great memorizer, and pain too. Old Panic made my father's recollections vivid. My father was a movie extra in the tumult of Europe in the 1930s, the end of institutions, the rise of government by gangster. My father was shipped to Mussolini's Italy. Italy belonged to Mussolini for a time. Fascists steal nations. When he was 7, the youngest of 9, that's when he was shipped to Mussolini's Italy. My father was named after an older sibling who died. August. Augusto. Auguste. My father was named for a dead boy and renamed for every country he lived in. A refugee, forced to be restless by the world. There was no choice here, no psychology. Too often, politics is mistaken for psychology, mistaken by the naive, a mistake used tactically by oppressors to keep people insecure, keep them feeling that they are the reason that their lives are incomplete, far from even pursuing happiness, always searching for security and safety. Self-blame instead of justice. It is their inferiority, the people's, never injustice imposed upon them by others. Some refugees internalize the toxic message of inferiority and believe it is their own mind's reasoned words and not propaganda. Some vacillate between the poles of inferiority and a pull to dignity. Some generally ignore the whole thing, accept the falsely superior being's claims, and enjoy themselves anyway. My father was one of those. My grandfather died from gas poisoning in World War I. My grandmother was saintly, literate, impoverished, and naive. That word again. My father worshiped my grandmother. I love her. I differ with my father only in this: innocence when not leavened by cunning, is a limited virtue. She did what she could, what she knew to do. She abandoned her young children to fascists, believing in the black shirted thugs and the Blessed Trinity. My mother loved her mother in law, but never understood her mother in law's choice, even under the circumstances. I can hardly speak to it. I never was in such desperate circumstances. My father said, and truly believed, that he had no ill will toward his mother, and he didn't, consciously. But he had a rage inside of him, a rage with no object, and he bequeathed that rage to me. It wasn't Grandma's fault. She did the best she could. She did all that she was equipped to do. But the objective result of her choices sucked. I can't say what Grandma's obligations were, but this many generations later, we have an obligation to understand. Referring the decisions of our fate to others and tolerating what is intolerable, to play the role of abused children well into our maturity, to be fools, was excusable for my grandmother and inexcusable for us. My father never understood injustice. I am much smarter than he ever was, partly because of what he learned before me and the opportunities that he gave me to develop my mind and vision. He resented what I grew up to be because it threatened his understanding of the way things are and a perspective of denial, which helped him survive and thrive. My father lived in a modified Sophie's Choice, where no one got killed and the family was eventually reunited. But no one also really came to terms with what Mussolini was, even after the fact. He just was, a moment like any other, a neutral condition that one made the most of. Grandma became a Catholic Democrat when she came to the United States without even sensing a contradiction with her then recent past. My mother's people used to listen to Mussolini's speeches on a wireless in America. They swallowed the bait and switch. Their masters told them to. Identify with the master's glory, to be happy with that. Inferior and subservient fans of the champions who were never personally allowed on the field. They bought it, like all people who deem themselves ordinary by it. Suspicious of would-be leaders encouraging equality and democracy. Socialists, whether those leaders were or weren't. My people took the bread, small amounts, and the circuses, endless. My mother eventually knew the economic, cultural, political, psychological score. My father never did. He ridiculed professors and found his joy in physical activity, preferring games to work, not afraid of either. The Italian fascist schools were run by priests, pedophiles. They would crawl into my father's bed and play. Italy could have been Alabama or Boston or Chicago. Then, a few years ago, always. The molestation was just a footnote, an anecdote for my father that he told me about once in passing. He didn't see it as shaping his life, which it surely and partially did. For him, abuse just came with the territory. I was the one who was concerned about what was fair. My father hated that about me. He thought I was weak and whining. And my father's insensitivity to my demands for justice made me disrespect him, not fighting for justice, taking it, figuring out a way to get yours, in spite of the fascists and the pedophiles, not saying the truth about them. To me, that was weak. You can't be mad at the world all the time, he told me. You can't change the world. It was our disagreement. He wanted me to conquer the world as it is, to join the white supremacists. He busted his ass to give me a shot to win. I wanted to tell the truth and live it. I would define success for myself and tell off the world. My dad suffered more than I ever could, but I have more guts than he knew were possible. We can change the world if we change ourselves. If we accept tyranny, then every pedophile's molestation and every gangster's murder is a black mark on our souls. My father and grandmother had excuses. You and I don't. We know right and wrong, and we know what is possible. What happens to us is of no consequence. What we are is all. My father was the youngest, and he was tough on me. He yelled at me a lot. I received distant secondhand smoke of poverty, molestation, fascism, and World War. Dad was an Italian-American Babe Ruth, powerfully kicked soccer goals instead of home runs, larger than life, fun or mad or depressed, devoted to experience, bored by explanations, love hungry, a love junkie, finding it with my mom, and juicing on the contaminated street trash of his old newspaper clippings. 8 goals in one game, competitive, needing to be ratified as a winner in others' eyes, but forgetting about all of it when it was time to sleep on the couch with a golf tournament on TV in the family room. Dad was a weird mixture of I did it and I could have been a contender. Elation and regret. Rage at me and passionate pride and admiration of me. From moment to moment, all equally authentic, all fleeting, Italian Zen. He was a good man in spite of everything. Emphasis on good, emphasis on man, imperfect and lovable. He scarred me and gave me so much to be grateful for. He was the best of fathers. He was the worst of fathers. The Blessed Trinity beat the fascists in overtime. Dad's name was Americanized, ridiculous term, when he was inducted into the American Army. Thomas, no longer Tommaso. I'm glad of the change. Dad was an Italian American. I'm an American. That's what he wanted. That's what I am. My people were from Italy with a brief stop in France. I'm from here. Dad never wanted to go back to see Italy. Why would he? And I'm only mildly interested. I'd go as a tourist, not in search for roots. FDR is mine, not the Roman emperors. Twain, not Dante. Sinatra, not Pavarotti. New York City, not Rome. My father was an inventor. He invented me. The myth of World War II says that because we defeated the Nazis, we are somehow better than them. A black pundit on TV says that America was founded on white supremacy and argued for reparations, damages in a huge class action suit. Ty Cobb called Babe Ruth a, quote, nigger. I hope the quotation marks communicate my revulsion. Because Babe Ruth was eclipsing Cobb, putting an end to his mastery. My father was an Italian-American Babe Ruth. Dad wasn't a, quote, nigger. Dad was just called a, quote, nigger. Just like the Babe. Just like anything lively. that comes in the peripheral vision of the jerks who want to be on top now and always. The ownership society, things, status, and slaves. Dad revered America. He bought the myth of the shining city on the hill, although he never read it. He yelled at me when I criticized my country, which I started to do in my 20s. But I saw by that time how America disappointed my father's dream of it. He didn't understand that his masters didn't share his innocent, childish heart. The masters would never admire the humor and athleticism and creative talent and wisdom of the African Americans who lived in the poor Rochester, New York neighborhood where my father had his small time body and fender shop, like my father did, in politically incorrect expressions of imperfect love, like his love for me. Dad didn't understand that the bullies only saw other people in relation to themselves as threats or marks to be exploited. I didn't understand for a time that my father was not a bully. He was never intentionally mean to me, although he did hate me sometimes. My existence made him feel bad. He wasn't capable of understanding what I was all about. He felt more than he thought, and he felt that I was the impending destruction of his illusions about the world. And he was right. He wanted to toughen me up. He yelled at me when I cried as a toddler when shampoo got in my eyes. But he didn't understand that I didn't want to beat the bullies at their game. He didn't see them as bullies. He saw them as the reigning champs, ready to be knocked off. We would never see eye to eye. I wanted a new game. Still do. One great gift that my father gave to me, in spite of both of us, was his example. He ignored the oppressors and had his fun anyway. This had nothing to do with what he thought. It had all to do with who he was, which was where his genius lay. His being far exceeded his ideas. Like the Negro Baseball League, Dad was founded and shaped by equal parts oppression and exuberance. America's greatness and Europe's and everywhere else's, such as it is, has always come from the defiance of the supremacists among them, inside them, outside them. Founded in white supremacy, forged in defiance and self-determination, wounded, hurtful shouts, and warm pleas for forgiveness, limited visions and figuring it out, sinful, imperfection, and the Blessed Trinity, not letting the self-proclaimed supreme masters snicker, ruin our fun. Copyright 2019, Richard Thomas.